In the tense aftermath of a U.S. military strike on Iran, a new threat loomed over Washington, not from abroad, but from within the halls of power. At a moment when fears of sleeper cells and domestic terrorism were climbing, one congressman decided the Justice Department's latest budget proposal was not just misguided, but dangerously reckless. Glenn Ivey walked into the House Oversight Committee hearing with a mission, and within minutes the room felt the weight of his challenge. Facing him was Attorney General Pam Bondi, defending a budget that in Ivey's eyes would strip federal law enforcement of the very tools needed to keep Americans safe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on what Congressman Gonzalez raised with you with respect to the new environment that we're in now with the essentially a war with Iran. A few weeks ago, your FBI director sat in the same chair and said that he thought in the budget that's been proposed, they're about $11.2 billion short. He wanted an additional 1,100 positions that were lost to attrition and 1,300 he wanted to have filled. That's before the scenario with Iran. Now, I know you submitted the budget already and you want to stick with it, but please take another look. This is a new environment. I think the points that the congressman raised are very valid with respect to the issue of sleeper cells and threats domestically here. Taking FBI agents off the street now is there isn't a worse possible time you could do it. So please reconsider that and move in a different direction on that, because we need more of them on the street, not fewer. Ms. DeLauro was raising issues with respect to your budget, the IOI cuts and the 86 agents that are going to be cut too. And the concern I have on that front, I know you're saying they want to be on the street, but they're ATF agents that do things that aren't on the street. So like, for example, the Nibbin work where they match the cartridges to the guns is critical. And I'm very concerned that some of the cuts you're going to make are going to impact that. And the Nibbin pieces are critical for state and local law enforcement. It's like you used to be, because a lot of them don't have the resources to track it down. And the information that they can get, they can turn it around in 48 hours. So the man who attempted to assassinate now President Trump, the connection that was made was through this apparatus, this approach. The same thing with the Minnesota assassin. So that's an area where we can't afford to have those kind of cuts, I don't think, at this time. And the performance of fewer regulatory inspections. I had gun dealers in my district who needed those inspections to take place. And important findings have been made, certainly with respect to tracking crime guns and cracking down on gun dealers who are working illicitly. I'm not saying they all do. I mean, many of them operate in the right way, but the only way to track it down is through inspections that have to be aggressive. And by the way, even under the current regime or the previous regime, I think some of them didn't get inspections for maybe every 10 years or so. So it wasn't like it's a constant harassment piece. But I've got some folks here in the corner of the hearing room who are from my district, Moms Demand Action, DMV Mothers Like Me, Women's Missionary Society. I met with them a few weeks ago, and the concern was the issue of gun violence on our streets and the desire to make sure that the federal presence continues to push hard to make sure we close those cases. You're reducing resources, you're reducing the number of agents, as Mr. Patel said. That's moving in the opposite direction. What response would you give to them with respect to the steps that you're taking to make sure not only that we stay safe, but we get even safer and do even more to get violent offenders off the street and get the guns off the street before the violent offenders get them?
So first, Congressman Ivey, you're a former prosecutor, and I'm smiling because I could see that in some of your questions. Thank you for those questions. I'm going to try to answer them all in order of how you ask them. You ask about the FBI, our budget, and Director Patel clarified that in front of the Senate, I think, and our budget includes $10.1 billion, 12,926 agents for the FBI.
I think clarification would be gentle. It was a complete flip-flop on what he said when he was here.
So
and he was asked 3 times by
prioritized.
Ms. DeLauro just to make sure that he was right about what he had said when he was
They
testifying.
prioritize realignment of personnel to the field to carry out national security, which you just talked about, intelligence, criminal law enforcement, and criminal justice missions.
Can I do-
The
can I
budget.
do
Wait,
this?
can I just keep?
If-
I only
if-
have 34 seconds to
I've
answer
got
you, and I
three
really
quick
want to
questions
answer.
for you, and I'd love
You're
to get.
asking three
I'd love to-
questions
I'd
and you
love to
haven't
get
let
your
me answer
answers.
one.
I'd
I
love to
wanna
get your
talk about
answers in
Niven.
writing. Quick questions.
Niven,
When you were the Attorney General in Florida,
Chairman, can I
you
answer the
offered-
question?
You offered, after the Parkland shooting, I believe this is my time, under the rules, and I had,
Stop the clock.
can we stop the clock?
Stop the clock at a different.
Mr. Chairman,
Until filibuster.
what I just said was, if you could submit your answers in writing, that would be great. I don't think I've made any kind of statement that's been accusatory with respect to her or her professional reputation. There's been no attack on her. These were just questions that were asked. I'm seeking the answers in writing, which would be great. But I have a couple others that I'd like to ask too, and we'll do them on. No, it hasn't. You cut me off when there were 30 seconds left. Yeah. So, well, that's true too. A couple of you all went over like a minute and a half.
Over almost 2 minutes.
I just would like my 30 seconds back. And then if she can submit answers in writing, that'll be fine. But, I want to get these questions in while she's here.
Go ahead.
I want to ask the questions and she can submit the answers. This is my 5 minutes. I get to do it the way I want to do it. Under the committee rules and under the House rules. These are my 5 minutes. And as I said, I have not been disrespectful to this witness. I have not. Or, okay. When you were the Attorney General in Florida, after the Parkland shooting, my understanding is that you moved to ban gun sales to people under 21. Is that a position that you would take now as the Attorney General? I have a bill, H.R. 2368, which does something like that. I would be interested in if you'd be willing to co-sponsor or support that bill. You also moved to enact red flag laws, allowing a judge temporarily to confiscate weapons when he or she viewed that the person was at risk of hurting himself or someone else. Is that a position you would continue to support now? And the last one is ghost guns. Ghost guns, I don't think you took a position on it back when you were the AG in Florida, but we've had 2 bills come through here in the Congress, all Democratic co-sponsors. I think there's no argument that ghost guns have any, appropriate use on the street. They only help criminals avoid prosecution. Would you support a legislative ban on ghost guns? And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers.
He started where the stakes were highest, the FBI. Ivey pointed out that even before the crisis with Iran, FBI Director Christopher Wray had warned lawmakers the Bureau was already operating at a shortfall of over $1 billion. He had requested funding for more than 2,400 additional positions, a mix of agents and critical staff, to close dangerous gaps. Instead, the budget in front of them proposed cutting 1,100 positions through attrition and leaving another 1,300 seats unfilled. Ivey's voice was sharp as he called it what it was, cutting muscle during a crisis, not fat. At a time when the FBI should be reinforcing its presence on the streets, the plan seemed to do the opposite. He didn't stop there. He warned that pulling agents out of the field now was not just ill-advised, it was the worst possible timing. If there was ever a moment to expand intelligence gathering, counterterrorism operations, and domestic threat investigations, this was it. But Ivey's attack didn't just target the FBI numbers. He zeroed in on another critical agency, the ATF. Specifically, the cuts to the NIBIN system, the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, which plays a silent but pivotal role in solving major gun crimes. It's the technology that matches shell casings to specific firearms, turning random evidence into investigative breakthroughs. Ivey reminded the room that Ivey had been instrumental in identifying suspects in high-profile cases, including assassination attempts, cases solved in less than 48 hours because of that database. If the ATF lost personnel, Ivey argued, the ripple effect would cripple state and local law enforcement, many of which rely entirely on federal resources to handle such forensic work. This wasn't theoretical. Without Ivey, shootings could go unsolved, and dangerous offenders could walk free. Then came the pivot that took the hearing from a policy debate to something far more personal. Ivey turned the conversation toward Bondi's own record, and the contrast he drew was impossible to ignore. Back when she served as Florida's Attorney General, Bondi had backed sweeping gun control measures after the Parkland school shooting, supporting a ban on gun sales to anyone under 21, and championing red flag laws to temporarily remove firearms from those deemed a danger to themselves or others. But now, under the congressional spotlight, those strong stances seem to have vanished. On one issue in particular, ghost guns, Bondi had never taken a position as AG. These untraceable, unregistered firearms had surged into the national conversation, with law enforcement warning they were tailor-made for criminals looking to dodge prosecution. Ivey pressed her to take a stand, asking point-blank if she would support a legislative ban. The question lingered in the air. And then he raised the stakes. Ivey invited Bondi to co-sponsor his own bill, H.R. 2368, legislation that mirrored the very reform she once supported. It was a calculated move that cornered her into a choice: stand by her past principles or expose herself to charges of political backtracking. Bondi faced a high-pressure moment, one that could either reinforce her credibility or unravel it. The tension in the room was already palpable, but procedural chaos pushed it even higher. Ivey's allotted time became a battlefield. There were interruptions, objections, and calls to stop the clock. Disputes over House rules erupted, with Ivey insisting on his full 5 minutes, and Bondi attempting to navigate the interruptions while defending her position. The back and forth grew sharper. At one point, Ivey accused her of flipping her stance compared to earlier testimony. Bondi pushed back, insisting she hadn't been attacked personally, but the mood in the room told a different story. The air was thick with the feeling that this wasn't just about line items in a budget, it was about trust, transparency, and whether leaders would stand by their convictions when the pressure mounted. As the minutes ticked by, Ivey widened the lens. He spoke about the broader consequences these cuts would have for local communities. Grassroots groups had come to watch the hearing: Moms Demand Action, DMV mothers, members of the Women's Missionary Society, ordinary citizens with extraordinary stakes in the outcome. Ivey reminded everyone that these people weren't here for political theater. They were here because gun violence was claiming lives in their neighborhoods, and federal law enforcement played a critical role in solving those crimes. The budget, he argued, wasn't a dry spreadsheet, it was a set of choices about whether to give those communities the resources they needed or to leave them exposed. By now the narrative had shifted from a back-and-forth exchange to a high-stakes reckoning. Ivey painted the DOJ's budget not as a neutral fiscal decision, but as an active retreat from the front lines of public safety. He framed the proposed reductions as a risk to national security at a time when the country could least afford it. The Iranian crisis, potential sleeper cell threats, rising concerns over domestic extremism, all of it added up to a landscape where cutting agents was, in his words, moving in the opposite direction. Bondi's responses, though measured, couldn't escape the weight of the accusations. She defended the budget as a realignment of personnel to better address national security, intelligence, and criminal justice missions. But Ivey wasn't convinced, and his final remarks made it clear he thought the nation deserved more than reassurances. He reminded the room that the stakes weren't abstract, they were about getting violent offenders off the street, and seizing weapons before they could be used. He tied it back to the cuts and inspections of gun dealers, warning that fewer checks meant more opportunities for illegal firearms to slip into circulation. Even responsible dealers, he argued, needed oversight to keep the playing field fair and the streets safe. The clash had moved beyond a testy exchange. It had become a microcosm of a larger national divide. On one side, the push to tighten belts and realign resources; on the other, the demand to double down on enforcement when threats are rising. The audience, both in the hearing room and watching from home, could feel the stakes in every interruption, every pointed question, every pause before an answer. As Ivey closed, he stripped away the procedural clutter and returned to the heart of the matter. This wasn't a disagreement over numbers, it was a battle over priorities. Were they going to meet the moment with the resources and resolve it demanded, or would they hide behind bureaucratic language while leaving communities vulnerable? His final words were as much for the public as for Bondi. He said this wasn't just a hearing, it was a reckoning. And then he left the question hanging in the air: when national security and public safety are on the line, do we settle for spin, or do we demand the truth? If you believe these are the moments when leaders must be held accountable, don't just watch from the sidelines. Like this video, share it with others, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next time power is put under the microscope. Stay sharp, stay loud.